Hello and welcome to History and Film. I'm Rich Simmons. This is the first episode that I'm doing for YouTube here, just because apparently a lot of you are finding podcasts on YouTube, which makes sense versus randomly finding them on your Spotify or iTunes or Apple feed. So I've actually been doing this podcast since 2017. The whole conceit was just to do history in chronological order, one movie at a time. So that's kind of the thing I thought was always neat, how characters in one movie might be related to characters in another movie. So I put together an entire timeline of world history and just progressed one movie at a time, trying to focus on movies that are actually good. If you go back and listen to that, they might be a little rough at first, but bear with me. About halfway through the world history timeline, I do get a co-host, and that makes things a little more interesting. He is on paternity leave right now, so I figured now was a good chance to maybe try to get onto YouTube without the logistical issues of trying to figure that out remotely since he lives 3 states away. So please go find that on wherever you get your podcasts. History and Film is available. We're in the middle of American history. We've done a lot of side things. We've just done a lot of Game of Thrones. Not a lot, but we've done some Game of Thrones episodes just because that's fun for us as well. So today we're going to talk about the Oscar-nominated short film Butterfly, or Papillon. My pronunciation is, I'm sure, far from perfect. So I don't always watch the Oscar-nominated shorts, but I always watch the Oscars, and I wanted to make sure I'd seen as many films as possible. So the short films are a little tricky sometimes. I don't like to go and watch them at the library in Wichita or the theaters in Wichita, just because it ends up being a long day. Even if you're doing just one category, it's still 2 or 3 hours worth of shorts, and you don't really get to have a chance to process them. So I wish there was a better way to listen to them or watch them online at home, frankly. And so what I did the day before the Oscars, I went to Gold Derby to kind of see which ones were most likely to win in the short film categories and the documentary category. So I watched one each of, feature documentary, short documentary, animated short, and live action short. Of those 4 films, only one ended up winning the Oscar. This one did not win the Oscar. It lost to The Girl Who Cried Pearls, which I watched a couple of days ago, and I thought Butterfly was the better film. So I was kind of surprised that The Girl Who Cried Pearls won. But we're not here to talk about that one. So I always like to do Rotten Tomatoes ratings. This does not have a Rotten Tomatoes rating. I guess I've never really looked for shorts on there, so. But it is a 7.1 on IMDb. Very, very cool animation style. I looked after the fact. What sucks nowadays is you don't know what's real and what's computer generated or even AI, and so there's a very unique look to the animation here. I'm gonna trust that what they say it is what they say it is, which is oil painting on glass. Maybe some canvases for its backgrounds too. So you can there's certain scenes where in the water, and you can even see like the brush strokes on the animation, and it's really beautifully done. And they kind of do some age things. So we start with an old man swimming in the ocean, and we cut back to him as a childhood. Everything's just painted kind of frame by frame, and beautifully done. It's on YouTube. It's less than 15 minutes. I haven't even started talking about it really yet, but I highly recommend checking out Butterfly, Papillon. It is a little tricky with common names. They're kind of hard to find, but you should see a still image of a man swimming. I guess I can try to leave a link on YouTube here for those just listening to the regular podcast. I'm sure you can find it. So this is essentially a biopic of a North African French Jewish swimmer named Alfred Nakache. I don't know that they say his name in the entire film, and you just kind of see it at the very end in the closing text. So a little confusing at first when they kind of, it's in French, and you're like, wait, are we in France? But then they show him winning a North African swimming championship. So I'll break all that down for you to kind of get your head around the history of this. So we did do an episode a while back on the Battle of Algiers, And that does kind of tie into this. And one thing we talked about there was France didn't see it as like a colony. They saw it as just another part of France, kind of like in the United States. Like Alaska and Hawaii are just part of the United States. They saw Algeria as just now a part of France. And that was from 1830 to 1862 that you had French Algeria as part of France. Now, despite that, of course, everywhere in history is always crazy racist, so they didn't consider the Muslims and the Jews in North Africa to be French citizens. Now, there was a law passed in 1870 where they did let most of the Jews in North Africa, the Algerian Jews, become citizens, but not the Muslims. So Nakache's family had immigrated well before he was born to Algeria from Iraq. So as I said, the film opens with an old man swimming in the ocean, and the mood with the music and everything is very kind of contemplative, and he's thinking back on life, and that's why we cut then back to his childhood, playing with his friends in the water. And at first I kind of thought maybe this would be on the Mediterranean coast, which it could be, but the town Nakache was from was called Constantine, and it does have a river going through it and several local swimming holes kind of place. So could just be in the city of Constantine here. It's never really explicitly said. We also see that he's afraid of the water early on, which is something people have said, that this famous swimmer was initially afraid of the water. We see his mother kind of dunking him in the bathtub in a way to get him more acclimated to the water and being very motherly. And again, because it's a short film, the whole thing, we're doing his whole life in 15 minutes. It then quickly cuts to, okay, now he's playing with his friends. He's swimming in the presumably the ocean or the Mediterranean Sea probably. And quickly we see this translate to success at swimming competitions. Nakache didn't necessarily have a lot of formal training. He was taught to swim, but as far as like technique and things like that go, it sounds like he kind of just figured it out by himself. And in fact is one of the pioneers of the butterfly stroke or technique, whatever you call it. Was that even it? I don't really know swimming techniques. So, but apparently the butterfly stroke wasn't really a thing until the 1930s, and Nakache is considered one of the pioneers of it. So I kind of like the idea that basically he's just figuring stuff out on his own and kind of came up with this as a good way. It made me think of the Fosbury Flop. I'm a track and field coach as well. So yes, he starts winning local swimming competitions by the age of 16. The film shows him winning a North African championship in 1931, which again was when he was 16 also. I'm not sure when he actually met his future wife, Paula. So again, I'm not sure how it's pronounced with the French. So her name's Paul, but with an E at the end. So when I'm saying it, it sounds like a man's name. I swear when I heard someone say it online with a French accent, it sounded very feminine. So just go with me on that. So the film shows them meeting in 1931 at the swimming competition. They end up getting married in 1937. Not exactly sure when they met, but she was also a swimmer and very active in this world. And she was also an Algerian Jew like Nakache. He moves to Paris, kind of goes up for a national French swimming competition, ends up staying there to train and go to school to become a PE teacher. His wife also trains to become a PE teacher. And of course, this is all now 1930s Europe. You get to 1936 Olympics, and Nakache's 4x2 relay team doesn't medal. They ended up fourth, just one spot away from the medal stand, but they finished one spot ahead of the Germans. So very satisfying for a Algerian Jew, French Algerian Jew, to beat the Nazis at their own games, literally. We see this in the film where they finish the race and he goes to shake the hand of his opponent in the next lane and gets the cold shoulder. The guy ignores him. We start to see the anti-Semitism and racism that Nakache had to deal with throughout his life. This is something he had to deal with even before the war. And I think the movie kind of, again, it's a short film, so it kind of rushes everything together. But even before the war itself, he was facing a lot of issues, ends up leaving a club over racist treatment. So we get into the war. This was kind of interesting, both in the film and even more so doing the research here. So we've talked a little bit before about Vichy, France, and Casablanca. You kind of see how the French seem to be almost working with the Germans, and how does that all work? And so I don't think I've ever really defined it. So in June of 1940, the Germans take Paris and can start controlling, occupying a lot of northern France. Southern France remained unoccupied and governed out of Vichy, which is kind of the top of the southern part of France. The reason I think it was always so confusing for me was that Vichy France seems to be complicit with the Germans, so I just figured that was also part of what Germany controlled. Basically, it was an appeasement thing. So because the Germans were controlling the northern half of France, the southern half that wasn't occupied chose to basically, I don't know if collaborate is fully the right word. They weren't necessarily, I don't think, sending troops to help the German cause, but they were trying to not piss off the Germans who were controlling Paris and just kind of keeping their heads down and appeasing the Nazi regime to not cause further trouble for France. And I was also kind of surprised to what extent life was kind of just going on during the war. I guess we've seen this on the U.S. side with, we did A League of Their Own and all the baseball stuff still happening during the war. But there were still swimming competitions going on in France during the war with the Germans occupying it. And I think we're seeing it now with Ukraine too. And like people just do kind of go about their lives even when they're in the middle of a war to a astonishing degree, I feel. And so again, the timeline gets a little tricky to get exact. And what we see in the film is just kind of very rushed over. There's a Nazi flag at one point, and you just kind of get the idea that things are not going well, and the racism is escalated with the German presidents, and all that's accurate. But yeah, it was just shocking to me the extent to which he was still competing in swimming competitions. So he ends up setting a world record in 1941 in Marseille, actually in the breaststroke, not the butterfly. Also, I saw two different kind of conflicting notes on this, but basically the idea that the Vichy government annulled or canceled the policy that had given citizenship to those Algerian Jews. They revoked that, and Nakache lost his French citizenship in the middle of the war here. So he stayed in France, but he was kind of a man without a state now. In the film, this is where we start to see him getting thrown out of competitions. And true to life, in the film, they show his French competitors siding with him and not basically, if you're kicking him out, we're not going to swim either, and they go swim in the ocean instead. The idea of them kind of showing solidarity with Nakache was accurate. And the film being so somber doesn't really show what a fun guy he was. This is a kind of guy who always had a smile on his face, was always making other people laugh, just a very loving, friendly, positive guy, which makes it even sadder when you see what he goes through here. So in the film, we see his family is now in hiding from the Gestapo. And in November of 1943, they were captured. I didn't see anything that it was dogs hunting them down in a cave like we saw in the film, but it definitely serves to illustrate the point in a short film here. 2 months later, after they were captured at Auschwitz, Nakache is separated from his wife and daughter, and he never sees them again. It was years before I don't know if he ever got official confirmation, but it was years before he realized, okay, they are 100% dead. It turned out they had been killed just a couple days after getting to Auschwitz. He did survive, partly maybe even because of the swimming. So he would kind of sneak into the water. They call them water tanks, but it looked to me almost like maybe a septic situation. I mean, or hopefully it was clean water, obviously. But anyway, he would swim kind of maybe against the rules, but then would teach the guards to swim, would teach his fellow prisoners to swim. It was kind of both. Again, real life's always more shades of complicated than you can get from even one note in an article or in a short film here. But guards would punish him by making him chase things in the water, which they show in the film. They have some food they're throwing to the bottom of the water. Hey, if you want it, you got to swim down and get it. They're definitely taunting him. They would punish him. This is not in the film. They would punish him by making him swim in all kinds of weather. It was freezing cold. You have to go out and swim anyway if you like swimming so much, that kind of thing. But it also probably helped keep him alive, just that he had this skill that he could share with the guards, teaching them to swim and showing off kind of thing. After a year at Auschwitz, the Russians, the Soviets, come in and are liberating, or right before they can liberate Auschwitz, the Germans do one of their death marches to get the prisoners of the camp out of there and take them to Buchenwald. And after 3 months in Buchenwald, Nakache was freed when Americans liberated that camp. There had been 1,300 prisoners on the trek from Auschwitz to Buchenwald, and all but, it was, I forget the exact number, it was less than 50 survived, and Nakache was just one of those 50. Before the Holocaust, he had weighed about 170, over 170 pounds, and was under 90 pounds by the time he was liberated, by one account. And the crazy part, I don't really remember the liberation part in the film. They definitely show him in the prison, and then it's just kind of like the war ends kind of thing. I don't remember them actually showing a liberation moment from the camps. Anyway, what's crazy is a year later, a year after having lost essentially half his body weight, he's winning again. He's part of a French relay that set a world record just a year after being liberated from Buchenwald. He did compete at the 1948 Olympics. I saw different number counts on this. Some saying he was the only Holocaust survivor to compete at the Olympics. Some saying there was one of two. Some saying one of three. Maybe it was kind of like, just depends on how you say it. You know, first versus 48 Olympics, 52 Olympics, etc. But yes, at most, from what I could find, was 3 Holocaust survivors ever competing at the Olympic Games, and Nakache was one of them, possibly the first when he competed at London in 48. The film does show him swimming post-war, and shows that his heart just isn't in it. And what's definitely being illustrated there is the loss of his wife and daughter, and he's dwelling is not really the right word, because we completely understand. He's definitely distracted by and haunted by the past. And this is kind of where the film ends. We kind of now have combined, we started with an old man swimming in the ocean. Now we're back to an old man swimming in the ocean. And years have now passed since the days of his prime. And he's imagining being with his wife and daughter again. And that's basically the end of the film. And it cuts to talking about, he dies in 1983, which he had a heart attack while swimming, so very appropriately he died in the water. And the film makes it look like he's swimming in the bay near where they were captured. I couldn't find anything that said that was the case, but very, very sad. And the film leaves out, well, it says it in the closing text. So he did remarry, and his second wife is mentioned in the credits, and actually the film is dedicated in the closing credits to his second wife and his son that he had after the film. And if I was reading, so the closing text was in French, so if I was reading it correctly, there's also a connection between the filmmaker, Florence Malie, I can't say, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, between her and the Nakache family. That I swear the closing text said Nakache's son taught her how to swim. And her father knew Nakache back when they were both part of, I forgot to mention, they were part of the Toulouse Underground during the war, before he was captured, and that the filmmaker's father and Nakache knew each other from that time. So this was definitely a important film to this filmmaker. Again, Florence, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'll spell it for you just to show I'm not crazy. Mailhe. And when you get to French and not pronouncing half the letters, I really don't know. Mailhe, mail. Something like that, I don't know. In 2019, Alfred Nakache was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame. His great nephew accepted the honor on his behalf, and today there are lots of swimming pools in France named after him. So in our larger world history timeline, obviously we did several World War II movies, and this kind of fits right in with that. I'd probably put it right before, so we did episodes on Cabaret. You get to the beginnings of the war, and I'll probably place it in our timeline there. If you haven't already, check it out. Great film. Hope this was a little informational, maybe a good companion piece if you watched that film already. Hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown. I probably won't be doing all episodes here on YouTube, but check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. So yeah, anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.